gate and try to spot the LEED plaque right in front of those double doors. LEED stands for Leadership, Energy, and Environmental Design, and this building has a Platinum LEED certification. Platinum is the highest you can receive in LEED. Yeah. So when this building was first constructed, it used a system that it no longer uses today, but when complete, instead of having an AC, that tower pulled water from the Chicago River, circulating that water through the walls of the tower in order to cool it down, then sending that same water back into the Chicago River, a little bit warmer, but also a little bit cleaner as well. And that's one of many buildings with a LEED certification on our river. Now, of course, you've already noticed the next building on our right side. This was once the largest square foot building in the U.S. up until the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. This is the Merchandise Mart, completed in 1933. Graham Anderson, Probst and White are the architects, and they built that building for a man by the name of Marshall Fields. Marshall Field had a department store and 13 warehouses around the city of Chicago. He wanted those warehouses combined, so they built him this 4.5 million square foot Art Deco building. This is a beautiful example of the Art Deco style of architecture. This building is clad like a knight clad in armor and limestone terracotta. There are gems and ornamentation within that terracotta. The vertical lines surrounding the windows draw our eyes up to the top of the tower, where finally we see setbacks. Those setbacks create more shade to keep this building cooler as well. Those large Pez dispensers you see there are the heads of famous merchants. You'll find Marshall Field there along with Aaron Montgomery Ward. All right, we have reached the junction of the river here. This is where the main branch meets the south branch along with the north branch. And on the right side of our boat, we have Wolf Point. So first, take a look at the gate here. You'll spot this Y symbol with a double circle. That is the symbol of the junction of where we are right now. And you'll spot that symbol all over the city of Chicago, whether it is embedded in architecture or even artwork around the city. So that's one thing to look out for here. And also, the buildings that we see here, we have Wolf Point East, closest to the Franklin Street Bridge there. Next door we have the Salesforce Tower, and hiding behind the Salesforce Tower, we see Wolf Point West. The building with the red swirly statue in front is River Point. That's another with a Platinum LEED certification. Look next door at the building that kind of looks upside down. That's 150 North Riverside, and that building is truly unique. It sits between active train tracks and the Chicago River, meaning that the base and foundation of that tower is about the width of this boat that we're on. And the big question with that tower is, how is it standing there? So if you take a look back, there are diagonal steel beams at the bottom of the building. Those steel beams wrap completely around that tower to hold it up. But in addition to this, mass water damper tanks. Tanks holding 160,000 gallons of water sit on rollers at the top of the building on the inside. When the wind blows, causing that tower to sway in one direction, the water in those tanks sloshes to the opposite direction to keep that building balanced out there.
This will be my second one. I've done what I did in high school. We came for like our senior
Now,
day.
on our right side, we have a great view of the Riverwalk here, and there's a lot to do on a day in Chicago here. One thing you can do in the evening, check out the rectangular box here. It has a steel framing with a bunch of projectors inside. Every night in Chicago around 8:30, 9 o'clock, you can see the world's largest digital art projection, where the screen is the face of the Merchandise Mart. Once again, the second largest square foot building in the U.S. there. And there's more to do on our right side as well. We haven't talked completely about the history of this body of water yet, but it's significant falling from the bridges as you walk along the river walk here.
Any of the other like museums. I haven't been.
Are you a big museum person? Like you like learning?
I like going. Like I like to go. Yeah.
On our right side here, we have the Builders Building. Visually, I really like looking at this tower because the left end of it, Graham Anderson, Probst and White completed it in the later 1920s. About 15 years later, Skidmore, Owings and Merrill add this addition to the right end of the tower, along with the top 4 floors spanning across the building as well.
The lobby area.
Why don't you need a lobby?
Well, we just were walking through. We didn't like actually get tickets because then it was closing soon.
Oh,
We were looking for the bathroom. So then we ended up being like a good children.
Now, once again, we have a great view of the the Riverwalk on our right side, but we also have a pretty good view of Wacker Drive here as well. Has anyone driven on Wacker Drive? Yes. Has anyone been lost on Wacker Drive? Yes. So for those of you who don't know, utilizing the underground of our city, there are actually tunnels that run underneath the Chicago River. But another example of this utilizing the underground of the city would be Wacker Drive. So if we're looking at Wacker, beneath it you'd find Lower Wacker, and beneath that you'd find Lower and Lower Wacker. And essentially your GPS just really doesn't work on Lower Wacker, that's why you get that frustration with it. But it's also the reason we don't spot as many semi-trucks here. Those lower levels of Chicago are for Burnham brothers are also the sons of Daniel Burnham, the architect who planned Chicago. Take a look at the two blue glass towers on our right side. Then look at the tallest tower right in between them. That is Mather Tower in the neo-Gothic style of architecture. And when Mather Tower there was complete in 1928, that was the tallest tower in Chicago for 20 days. Mather Tower was also supposed to have a twin tower that would have sat right next door there where you see the words London House. That's a rooftop bar with great views of the main branch. But had we got that twin tower here in Chicago, it would have sat right next door. Now, once again, that building is in the neo-Gothic style of architecture, and so is the next one. On the left side of the river here, take a look at the Chicago Tribune Tower. Also in the neo-Gothic style of architecture, it has an American flag at the very top. Those arches that you see there are called flying buttresses. Now, when the Chicago Tribune wanted a tower, they held a contest to see who could design the most beautiful one. So this is the building that won that contest. And at the base of the building, there are pieces from over 150 different structures from all over the world embedded in the base of the building, from the moon to the Great Wall of China. Now, Chicagoans actually favored the tower that got second place in that contest. We don't have that building in Chicago, but we do have one inspired by it. It would be the Art Deco building on our right side with a marble base here. Once again, inspired by the building that got second place to the current Chicago Tribune Tower. Now, Jean-Baptiste Pointe-du-Sable, once again, the first non-native settler in what would become Chicago, had a fur trading post that sat exactly where this Apple store is today. That Apple store is in the prairie style of architecture. This very flat roof is prairie style architecture. And that building is so flat it looks like a MacBook from above. And the people at Apple thought this too. So they put a giant Apple logo on top of that building, and less than 2 hours later, the architect called and said, "That's not a part of my design." And they had to go back up there and scrape it off just 4 hours later. On our right side, take a look at the two brown brick towers. This is the largest Hyatt Regency in the U.S. with over 2,000 rooms. And I use the Hyatt Regency to point out the fourth tallest building in Chicago. That tall white tower there is the Aon Center, complete in the 1970s by architect Edward Durrell Stone. Edward Durrell Stone originally clad that building in Italian marble, and it was beautiful. But after 9 harsh winters in this city, that marble began to crack with the potential to fall down. So Chicago told the architect he needed to do something about this, and he did. He reclad that building in North Carolina granite, a mistake that cost the architect $80 million, nearly half of what it took to build that tower in the first place. Take a look at the James Hardy on our right side, then look beyond it. The building with the undulating balconies there is up.
Let's see if we can move downstairs.
1900 at 3 a.m. using dynamite. They didn't warn anyone, but they blew up the remainder of that dam. And that's what did it. They reversed the flow of the Chicago River. They blew up the dam that night, sending all of our soiled, stinky water down the Chicago River, down the Des Plaines, down the Mississippi, ultimately to the Gulf of Mexico. Chicago solved its dirty water problem by making it someone else's dirty water problem. And then St. Louis sued Chicago. So St. Louis sues Chicago. They come to the city where the case was held, and the judge actually asked St. Louis, well, what do you do with your waste? Ultimately to the Gulf of Mexico. So Chicago wins this case, but it's not at all the end of the story. This city goes on to be sued by all of its neighboring states, including Illinois, and all of Canada. The main premise being that the city of Chicago was going to drain Lake Michigan. Now, they did some math and they had a point. They estimated that over the course of 500 years, Chicago would drain approximately 3/4 of an inch off of Lake Michigan. And while that number sounds small, Lake Michigan is a part of the Great Lakes, 20% of the Earth's fresh water. So this was a pretty big deal. And after about 30 years of battling it out in the courts, Chicago loses. And the only way to get to the Chicago River from Lake Michigan. It functions kind of like a bathtub. So I'm going to describe the process that we're going to go through here. We're going to sail through these gates that are completely open here. And if any other boats, these gates opened up, 880,000 gallons of water was released into the Chicago River. So once we sail into these gates, our boat, but while those gates are opening there, I am going to begin to continue with the narration here. So on the left side of our boat, beyond the lock here, we see Navy Pier. Navy Pier was complete in 1912, and then it was known as Municipal Pier Number 2. It was actually a port of the Great Lakes. A lot of international shipping took place there. Now, this pier, where we see these birds on the little ground of the city there, so fishermen would pay boaters a dime to drop them off at the pier there. They would fish and let them know what time they wanted to pick back up. Come pick them up with Dime Pier. So that's what's left of Dime Pier there, and it was initially placed there because there were captains that would refuse to bring their boats over to the port there because of choppy water. So that was to break up some of that water there. Now, Navy Pier, during World War II, it became a pilot training base. The youngest to graduate at 19 years old, George H.W.
I found out where the
Alright, another look at Navy Pier on our left side here now. The only building that you can drive here is tall here. It has undulating loads, 3 undulating loads going around the building. That's 3 load construction. The original design of that tower, that's Lake Point Tower, was by Mies van der Rohe, a German architect who we talked about on the main branch today. He designed that building with 4 load construction, 4 undulating loads. 2 of his students who took over that design realized that with 4 loads, when you look over, you'd be seeing the next condo. So they took away one of those loads, making that 3 load construction. Lived there, however, she lived in the water tower place during her time in Chicago. Alright, we have a view of the first tallest towers in Chicago here. So let's use point. So again, the St. Regis there, that's the 3rd tallest building in Chicago. Bring your eyes to the left of the St. Regis, spot the Aon Center. Bring your eyes to the left again. You'll see this tower. It kind of looks like it has shoulders with 2 radio antennas up top. That is the tallest building in Chicago. The 2nd tallest building in Chicago would be the Trump International Hotel and Tower. The 3rd tallest would be the St. Regis Hotel and Tower. The 4th tallest to the left of the St. Regis, the Aon Center once again there. Now the 5th tallest, bring your eyes to the right of the skyline. The building with the 2 radio antennas and those X's on the exterior, that is the John Hancock building. That is the 5th tallest building in our skyline. And those X's on the outside of the building actually hold the weight of the building on the exterior. Those support an open floor plan. Dr. Foster Kahn and Bruce Graham are the architects, who also developed those X's. Now, another look, that building to the left of the Aon Center I pointed out, I said it sort of has shoulders and those 2 radio antennas up top. That is the tallest tower in Chicago at 110 stories. It has 107 elevators, the fastest elevators in the world if you use multiple to get up to the top floor. With a gorgeous view of the building, let's properly introduce it. That is the WILLIS, is for Sears Tower. Complete in 1973, Skidmore, Owings & Merrill are the architects. Now, regarding the name of the building, Sears moved out in the early 2000s, and the Willis Insurance Group. Willis Insurance insured the Titanic. They took those floors that Sears occupied and they got a really good naming rights deal on the tower as well. This is a deal that lasts for 24 years. So believe it or not, in the next 4 or 5 years, they may be trying to get Chicagoans to call that tower another new name. Of course, we'll still call it the Sears Tower though. Now, those 2 radio antennas up top, there was a publicity stunt pulled by the city of Chicago a few years ago. Those 2 radio antennas got married. The reception was incredible. Now, another close look at the building there. I'm using singular language. I keep saying this building, but what if I told you that that was actually 9 towers? This is a method of construction known as bundled tubular, and it actually came about when the architects were planning that building. The story goes something like this. One of the architects took out a package of cigarettes, shook it up and opened it up to see that those cigarettes stood at varying heights. And that's what gave them this idea. Although one cigarette or a really tall tower might not be able to sustain on its own, if we bundle a few of them together, we'll get the world's tallest building, or what would be for 24 years here in Chicago. To the left of the Sears Willis Tower there, spot the building.